Beloved, there are moments in your life when you feel like heaven is silent. Doors are closed and breakthroughs seem delayed. You pray, you fast, and yet nothing seems to move. But listen carefully. Sometimes the problem is not that God has stopped speaking or blessing. Unforgiveness is one of the most powerful spiritual blockages in a believer's life. It is like an invisible chain that wraps itself around your heart and soul, keeping you tied to pain, anger, and resentment. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a spiritual force that opposes faith and interrupts the flow of God's power in your life. Fear is the language of doubt, the voice that whispers, "What if God doesn't come through?" Pride is the silent destroyer of divine flow. It disguises itself as strength, confidence, or wisdom, yet underneath it breeds independence from God. Pride whispers, "I can do this on my own," while heaven waits for humility to open the door to grace. Complaining is more dangerous than many realize. It is not just negative speech. It is a declaration of distrust in God's goodness. Every complaint releases an atmosphere that resists divine favor, because the language of heaven is gratitude, not grumbling. Doubt is the silent killer of faith, the invisible thief that steals your answer before it ever arrives. It is not always loud or obvious. It creeps in quietly after you pray, whispering questions like, "What if it doesn't happen?" Or "What if God doesn't hear me?" Offense is a slow poison that seeps into the soul and contaminates the purity of your spirit. It begins as a small wound, a word, an action, a misunderstanding, but when it is not released, it grows into bitterness that corrodes your inner peace. Comparison is one of the most subtle and destructive enemies of peace. It creeps into the heart unnoticed, whispering that what you have is not enough and who you are is not significant. Secret sin is the quiet destroyer of spiritual authority. It operates in the shadows, unseen by others, but deeply known in the chambers of the heart. Unbelief in small things is one of the greatest hindrances to experiencing the fullness of God's power. It seems insignificant, yet it quietly blocks the flow of greater blessings. Wrong relationships are one of the most subtle and dangerous obstacles to divine purpose. They can appear supportive on the surface, yet quietly pull your heart away from the path God has set before you. Negative words are not harmless expressions of frustration. They are spiritual seeds that shape the atmosphere of your life and determine the direction of your destiny. Every word you speak carries creative power, releasing either faith or fear, life or death, victory or defeat. Unhealed wounds are open doors in the soul through which old pain continues to enter new seasons. They are the emotional scars that never received full restoration, the memories that remain tender even after years have passed. Disobedience is one of the greatest causes of delay in a believer's life. It does not cancel God's promises, but it postpones their fulfillment until the heart returns to alignment. Lack of sowing is one of the most overlooked reasons why many believers never step into the abundance God has promised. The spiritual law of sowing and reaping governs every area of life: faith, finances, relationships, ministry, and destiny. Ignoring the voice of the Holy Spirit is one of the most subtle yet serious causes of spiritual stagnation. The Spirit of God is not only your comforter, but your compass. He leads, warns, convicts, and directs every step of your journey with divine precision. Living in regret is one of the enemy's most deceptive traps, because it chains your mind to what cannot be changed while blinding you to what God still desires to do. Regret keeps you facing backward, rehearsing past mistakes, missed opportunities, and failures that God has already forgiven. Unthankfulness is a silent thief that robs the believer of continual blessing and advancement. It may appear harmless, but in the spirit realm it shuts the very gates through which increase flows. Impatience is the enemy of divine timing. It pushes you to act before God completes His preparation. Every promise has a process, and every process has a purpose. When impatience takes over, it interrupts that process, forcing outcomes that are not yet ready and birthing burdens instead of blessings. Holding on to the past is one of the greatest hindrances to stepping into the new seasons God has prepared. The past can become a spiritual anchor that keeps you tied to places, people, and pain that no longer fit your future.